The unforeseen encounter. It was a warm Sunday morning in Middleton, a town that prided itself on its quaint streets and quiet charm. The golden sunlight spilled over the rooftops, and the air carried the inviting aroma of fresh pastries from a nearby bakery. Olivia Grant, a decorated African-American military officer, drove through the serene streets with the windows down, relishing her rare day off. Olivia had just returned from an arduous overseas deployment and was looking forward to a peaceful day of errands. Dressed in casual attire, a plain white blouse, jeans, and sneakers, Olivia had intentionally left behind the aura of her military rank. She loved the anonymity it offered, a chance to blend in with everyday life. Her destination was a small supermarket on Maple Street, where she planned to pick up groceries and unwind from the stress of duty. As she entered the supermarket, the jingle of the doorbell blended with the hum of activity inside. Families were shopping, elderly couples browsed the aisles, and children tugged at their parents, begging for candy. Olivia grabbed a shopping cart and began browsing the aisles, selecting fresh produce and other essentials. Meanwhile, at the far end of the store, a police officer named Mark Davidson had just entered. Known for his abrasive demeanor and short temper, Officer Davidson was infamous in the community for his heavy-handed approach to policing. His presence in the store seemed to unsettle a few shoppers, who gave him a wide berth. Davidson, tall and broad-shouldered, strutted through the aisles with an air of arrogance. He wore his police uniform like a badge of superiority, his belt jangling with tools of authority. He picked items off the shelves carelessly, tossing them into his cart with little regard for the mess he left behind. Olivia was at the dairy section when she first noticed Davidson. A carton of eggs slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. Instead of picking it up or informing the staff, he sneered and kicked the pieces aside, ignoring the inconvenience he caused others. Olivia, unable to ignore such disregard for basic courtesy, approached him. "Excuse me, officer," Olivia said, her tone calm but firm. "You dropped something. It would be considerate to clean it up." Davidson turned to her, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. He smirked, the kind of smirk that carried an unspoken superiority. "And who do you think you are, telling me what to do?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'm not here to play janitor." Olivia stood her ground. "I believe we all have a responsibility to be respectful in shared spaces, officer. That includes cleaning up after ourselves." Davidson's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You don't tell me my responsibilities. I'm a cop. I enforce the rules, not follow suggestions from random people." The confrontation caught the attention of other shoppers, who paused to watch. Some discreetly pulled out their phones, sensing that the situation was escalating. Olivia noticed the growing crowd but kept her composure. "I'm not trying to challenge your authority, officer," Olivia replied. "But respect isn't a suggestion. It's a principle." Davidson stepped closer, his presence looming. "Listen, lady," he said, his voice louder now. "I don't take orders from anyone, especially not from someone like you." The emphasis on "someone like you" sent a wave of shock through the bystanders. Olivia felt a familiar sting, the same sting she'd experienced countless times as a black woman in a field dominated by white men. But she refused to let her emotions take control. She folded her arms, her gaze unwavering. "I'm asking for basic decency, Officer Davidson. Nothing more." Davidson chuckled darkly, leaning in closer. "Decency? From me? You don't know who you're dealing with, lady. And you don't know who you're speaking to." Olivia shot back, her voice steady, but with an edge of authority that came from years of leading soldiers into battle. The exchange seemed to strike a nerve in Davidson. His face twisted with anger, and he stepped back, his hand hovering over his holstered firearm. The crowd collectively held their breath as tension crackled in the air. Olivia noticed the movement but remained calm, her military training kicking in. "Are you threatening me now, officer?" Olivia asked, her voice sharp and deliberate. "Because if you are, I assure you, it's a mistake you don't want to make." Davidson's eyes darted around, realizing the attention he had drawn. "You think you're something special," he spat. "I could end this right now." Olivia took a slow step forward, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to his agitation. "Go ahead, officer. Pull that weapon if you think it's the right thing to do. But know this: your actions have consequences, and you won't be able to run from them." The crowd was silent, tension thick in the air. A young woman whispered to her partner, "Should we call someone? This doesn't feel right." Davidson hesitated, his hand still near his firearm. Olivia's unwavering confidence seemed to throw him off balance. He hadn't expected resistance, let alone from someone he perceived as inferior. But Olivia wasn't just anyone. She was a leader, a protector, and someone who had faced far worse threats than an overzealous officer in a supermarket. "You're making the scene, officer," Olivia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "And trust me, this is not the kind of attention you want." Davidson finally dropped his hand from his weapon, but didn't step back. "You're lucky I'm feeling generous today," he sneered. "But don't think this is over." Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and stormed away, leaving Olivia standing tall and composed. The crowd began to disperse, their murmurs filling the silence Davidson left behind. Olivia exhaled quietly, her posture relaxing. She resumed her shopping as if nothing had happened, though she knew the incident wasn't truly over. As she pushed her cart toward the checkout, she couldn't help but notice a few people discreetly nodding at her in admiration. She acknowledged them with a polite smile, her thoughts already shifting to what might come next. The day that had started as a simple errand run had turned into something far more complex. Olivia knew that Davidson's behavior wasn't just about her. It was a symptom of a deeper issue, and she wasn't one to let such issues slide. As she left the store, the sunlight seemed a little harsher, the world a little less peaceful. But Olivia was resolute. She had faced injustice before, and she would face it again. What mattered was standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. A storm brewing. Olivia stepped into the bright sunlight, her shopping bag swinging lightly in her hands. The warm breeze did little to ease the tension that had settled in her chest after the confrontation with Officer Davidson. As she approached her car, parked under the shade of an old oak tree, she paused to take a deep breath. The encounter had been unpleasant, but it was nothing she hadn't faced before. Still, something about Davidson's brazen arrogance left her uneasy. It wasn't just his words. It was the unchecked confidence in his demeanor, the kind that came from believing there would be no consequences. She placed her groceries in the trunk and slid into the driver's seat, her mind replaying the incident. Davidson's hand hovering over his gun lingered in her thoughts. She had seen men like him before, quick to assert power but careless about the responsibility that came with it. The thought angered her, but she forced herself to focus. There was a time and place for everything, and she would address the matter the right way. As she pulled out of the parking lot, Olivia noticed a familiar car parked nearby. It was a black sedan, its windows tinted so dark they reflected the world like a mirror. She recognized it as one of the vehicles commonly used by the city's municipal officials. It seemed out of place in the small supermarket's lot, but Olivia didn't dwell on it. Instead, she drove home, determined to enjoy what was left of her day. Later that evening, Olivia sat on her front porch, sipping iced tea and watching the sun dip below the horizon. The serene view of her quiet suburban neighborhood did little to quell her restless mind. She knew the confrontation with Davidson wasn't over. People like him didn't let things go easily, especially when their authority was challenged. Her thoughts were interrupted by a ping from her phone. She picked it up and saw a message from Sergeant Marcus Bennett, one of her closest confidants in the military. "Marcus, saw the video. Are you okay?" Olivia's brow furrowed. She quickly opened the social media app he had linked. To her surprise, a video of the supermarket incident was trending. The clip was shaky but captured the entirety of her encounter with Davidson, including his derogatory remarks and his hand hovering over his firearm. The comments section was flooded with outrage, many condemning the officer's behavior, while others praised Olivia's composure. Great, Olivia muttered to herself. The last thing she wanted was to become the center of a social media storm, but the video had already gone viral. Her military background and Davidson's blatant misconduct made it inevitable. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Davidson sat in his dimly lit apartment, scrolling through his phone with growing anger. The video had reached him too, and the comments only fueled his rage. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, slamming his phone onto the table. "Who does she think she is?" Davidson had always viewed himself as untouchable. His position as a police officer had shielded him from consequences before, and he didn't see why this time should be any different. But the growing outrage online was a new variable, one he couldn't easily control. He picked up his phone again, dialing a number. The line clicked, and a gruff voice answered. "What is it, Davidson?" "I need your help, Chief," Davidson said, his tone urgent. "Some woman at the supermarket caused a scene today, and now there's a video making the rounds. It's blowing up." The voice on the other end sighed heavily. "Davidson, what did you do this time?" "It's not my fault," Davidson snapped. "She provoked me. I had every right to put her in her place. But now, people are twisting it like I'm the bad guy." There was a long pause. "You better hope this blows over, Mark. I can't keep covering for you if you keep pulling stunts like this. The department's already under scrutiny." "It's just a stupid video," Davidson argued. "People will forget about it in a few days." "Don't be so sure," the voice replied. "This woman, what's her name?" Davidson hesitated. "I don't know. She didn't tell me." "You'd better find out," the voice warned. "If she's someone important, this could get ugly fast." Back at Olivia's house, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, her instincts telling her it might be related to the video. "Colonel Harper," a familiar voice said on the other end. It was Mayor Robert Caldwell, a man she had worked with during community outreach initiatives for veterans. His tone was serious. "Mayor Caldwell," Olivia replied, straightening in her chair. "To what do I owe this call?" "I saw the video, Olivia," the mayor said. "And I'm concerned. That officer, Davidson, has a history of complaints, but nothing this public. I want to know if you're okay, and if there's anything I can do." "I'm fine," Olivia assured him, but his behavior was unacceptable. "He's a danger to the community." "I agree," Caldwell said. "And I plan to address this. I've already spoken to the police chief, but I want to make sure you're prepared. This kind of attention can bring both support and backlash." Olivia sighed. She appreciated the mayor's concern, but she wasn't one to back down from a fight for justice. "I'm prepared, Mayor. I've faced worse." "I don't doubt that," Caldwell said with a chuckle. "Just know that I've got your back. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." As the call ended, Olivia felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't just about her. It was about holding people like Davidson accountable. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. The following morning, the fallout from the video was in full swing. Local news outlets picked up the story, and community leaders began calling for an investigation into Davidson's conduct. The police department issued a vague statement promising to review the incident, but it did little to appease the public. Davidson, meanwhile, found himself increasingly isolated. His colleagues avoided him, knowing the controversy could taint their own reputations. Even his chief, who had often turned a blind eye to his behavior, was distancing himself. Olivia, however, remained steadfast. She spent the day fielding calls from reporters and supporters, carefully crafting her responses to focus on systemic change rather than personal grievance. For her, this was an opportunity to shine a light on the larger issues within law enforcement. But as the day went on, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that Davidson wasn't done. She had seen the look in his eyes, the kind of anger that didn't fade easily, and she knew that people like him didn't go down without a fight. As night fell, Olivia double-checked the locks on her doors and windows. She wasn't afraid, but she wasn't careless either. She had faced countless battles in her life, and she was ready for whatever came next. The aftermath and escalation. The morning sun rose over Middleton, casting its golden glow across the quiet streets. Olivia woke early, as she always did, her military discipline ingrained in her. She brewed a pot of coffee, savoring its rich aroma as she contemplated the day ahead. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, but she ignored them for the moment, choosing instead to ground herself in a morning routine that had carried her through far more challenging days. The events of the previous day were already spreading like wildfire. The viral video had thrust her into the spotlight in a way she hadn't anticipated. As she sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee, she opened her phone to see countless messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers. Some were messages of support, thanking her for standing her ground. Others were from journalists requesting interviews, their subject lines urgent and insistent. One message stood out, a simple email from a woman named Clara James, a former police officer who had resigned after blowing the whistle on misconduct within the Middleton Police Department. The email read, "Subject, you're not alone. Dear Colonel Harper, I saw the video, and I wanted to reach out. Officer Davidson has a long history of behavior like this. You're brave for standing up to him, and I want you to know I'm here to support you if you need it. I have information that could help. Let me know if you're interested." Olivia's eyebrows furrowed as she read the message. Clara's name was familiar. She had seen articles about the former officer's struggles after exposing corruption within the department. Olivia decided to respond, her instincts telling her that Clara might be an important ally. Across town, Officer Davidson was in a state of fury. He paced his living room, his phone clutched tightly in his hand as he read through the flood of comments on social media. Most of them condemned his actions, calling for his immediate suspension or termination. But a small fraction of the comments, those from like-minded individuals who shared his prejudices, emboldened him. They fueled his narrative that he was the victim, targeted unfairly for simply doing his job. Davidson dialed a number, his hand trembling slightly with anger. The call connected after a few rings. "Chief, this is ridiculous," he barked into the phone. "I'm being crucified out here for something that's been blown way out of proportion." Chief Randall Hayes sighed heavily on the other end. "Davidson, you put yourself in this mess. That video makes you look reckless and unprofessional. There's nothing I can do if the public is demanding action." "You're just going to throw me under the bus," Davidson shot back. "After everything I've done for this department." "Don't test me, Mark," Hayes warned. "I've been covering for you for years, but this time you've gone too far. The mayor's involved now, and he's not going to let this slide. My advice, lay low and keep your mouth shut until we figure out how to handle this." Davidson slammed his phone down onto the table. He wasn't used to being told no, and the idea of being handled infuriated him. His pride had been wounded, and he was determined to take control of the situation. Later that day, Olivia met Clara James at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Clara was a petite woman with short cropped hair and a determined look in her eyes. She greeted Olivia warmly, her handshake firm and her demeanor sincere. "Thank you for meeting with me," Clara said as they sat down. "I know you must be getting a lot of attention right now." Olivia nodded. "It's been overwhelming, but I'm more concerned about what this incident says about the system as a whole." "You mentioned you have information." Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Davidson isn't just a bad cop. He's part of a culture within the department that enables and protects behavior like his. When I reported misconduct, I faced retaliation from all sides. They made my life a living hell until I had no choice but to leave." Olivia listened intently as Clara recounted her experiences. She spoke of a network of officers who covered for each other, manipulated reports, and used their authority to intimidate those who dared to speak out. Davidson, Clara explained, was a key player in this network, a man who wielded his badge like a weapon and relied on the department's complicity to shield him from consequences. "I have documents," Clara continued. "Internal emails, records of complaints that were swept under the rug, even audio recordings of conversations with the chief. If you're serious about taking him down, I can help." Olivia's mind raced. The situation was more complex than she had imagined, but the revelation only strengthened her resolve. "Clara, I appreciate your courage," she said. "If we're going to expose this, we need to do it the right way. I'll make sure your information gets to people who can act on it." As the day wore on, the situation reached a boiling point. Mayor Caldwell held a press conference to address the growing public outcry. He stood at the podium, flanked by community leaders and members of the media. "I want to make one thing clear," the mayor began, his voice firm. "The actions of Officer Mark Davidson, as seen in the widely circulated video, are unacceptable and do not reflect the values of our city or our police force. I have ordered an immediate investigation into this incident, and I will ensure that justice is served." The mayor's words sent shockwaves through the community. For some, it was a long overdue acknowledgement of the systemic issues within the police department. For others, it was seen as political posturing. But for Davidson, it was a declaration of war. That evening, Olivia returned home to find an unmarked envelope on her doorstep. She opened it cautiously, her instincts on high alert. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "This isn't over. You don't know who you're messing with." The threat was clear, but Olivia refused to be intimidated. She immediately reported the message to the authorities, who promised to investigate. Still, she knew it was a sign that Davidson, or someone aligned with him, was growing desperate. Olivia's resolve only hardened. She had spent her life facing adversity, and she wasn't about to back down now. With Clara's evidence in hand and the support of the mayor and the public, she prepared for the next phase of the battle, a fight not just for herself, but for accountability and justice in a broken system. The tipping point. The sun had barely risen when Olivia Harper's phone buzzed with a flurry of notifications. She groaned softly, already anticipating another wave of emails, texts, and calls about the escalating situation with Officer Mark Davidson. She had spent much of the previous night poring over the documents Clara James had provided, her determination intensifying with every revelation of corruption and abuse within the police department. The documents painted a damning picture. Complaints against Davidson had been numerous, ranging from verbal harassment to unnecessary use of force, but each one had been dismissed under suspicious circumstances. Clara's audio recordings revealed senior officers mocking complainants and conspiring to bury evidence. It was clear that Davidson wasn't just an isolated bad apple. He was emblematic of a deeply rooted systemic issue. Olivia's thoughts were interrupted by a call from Mayor Robert Caldwell. "Colonel Harper," the mayor began, his voice laced with urgency, "we've received word that Davidson intends to file a formal complaint against you. He's claiming you provoked him and threatened his safety." Olivia raised an eyebrow, her military instincts kicking in. "That's absurd. The video clearly shows who the aggressor was." "I agree," Caldwell said. "But Davidson's allies in the department are pushing this narrative. They're hoping to discredit you before the investigation gains traction." Olivia's jaw tightened. She had expected resistance, but this was an outright attack on her character. "Let them try," she said firmly. "The truth is on my side, and I have the evidence to prove it." Speaking of evidence, Caldwell added, "I've reviewed the materials Clara James provided. If what she's uncovered holds up, this could be bigger than just Davidson. We're looking at a potential scandal that could shake the entire department." "That's the goal," Olivia replied. "This isn't just about him. It's about fixing a system that protects men like him." Meanwhile, Officer Davidson sat in a dimly lit diner, hunched over a cup of coffee. His face was pale, and dark circles under his eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Across the table sat two other officers, his closest allies within the department, Sergeant Tim Hollis and Officer Rick Anders. Both men had benefited from the same culture of impunity that Davidson now found himself relying on. "This is getting out of hand," Hollis muttered, glancing around the diner to ensure no one was listening. "The mayor's turning this into a full-blown investigation. We can't let this go any further," Davidson snapped, his hands clenching into fists. "That woman, she's making me look like a monster." "Let's be honest," Anders said with a smirk. "You didn't do yourself any favors. Pulling your gun in a supermarket. What were you thinking?" Davidson glared at him. "She disrespected me. She needed to know her place." Hollis leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You need to stay calm, Mark. The department's already under scrutiny, and we can't afford any more mistakes. We need to figure out a way to shift the narrative." Davidson's eyes darkened. "We don't need to shift the narrative. We need to shut her down." Later that afternoon, Olivia met Clara at a legal office downtown. They were greeted by James Sterling, a sharp-eyed attorney with a reputation for taking on powerful institutions. He had agreed to represent Olivia and assist in exposing the corruption within the police department. "I've reviewed the evidence Clara provided," Sterling said, gesturing to a stack of files on his desk. "This is a treasure trove. If we play this right, we can not only take down Davidson, but also force the department to implement real reforms." Olivia nodded. "That's the goal. But we need to be strategic. Davidson and his allies won't go down without a fight." Sterling leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "They're already trying to discredit you. The complaint Davidson filed against you is weak, but it's designed to muddy the waters. We need to stay ahead of them." Clara spoke up. "There's something else you should know. I've been hearing rumors that Davidson's been meeting with his old crew, officers who were part of the same clique that protected him. If they're planning something, we need to be prepared." Sterling tapped his fingers on the desk. "If they're conspiring, we might be able to use it against them. We'll monitor their movements and keep gathering evidence." That evening, Olivia attended a community meeting at a local church. The small auditorium was packed with residents, many of whom had been galvanized by the video of her confrontation with Davidson. The atmosphere was charged, a mix of anger, hope, and determination. A woman in her 40s stood up, clutching a microphone. "Colonel Harper, thank you for standing up to that officer. We've been dealing with men like him for years, and no one's ever held them accountable." Another man chimed in. "This isn't just about Davidson. It's about a system that lets officers like him act with impunity. We need real change." Olivia stood, addressing the crowd with the calm authority she had honed in the military. "Thank you for your support. I want you to know that I'm not backing down, and I won't stop until we see justice. But this fight isn't just mine. It's ours. We need to stand together and demand accountability." The crowd erupted into applause, their collective energy a powerful reminder that change was possible. As the night wore on, Davidson's paranoia grew. He sat alone in his apartment, the walls seeming to close in around him. The weight of his actions and the mounting public pressure were beginning to crack his confidence. He poured himself a drink, his hand shaking as he lifted the glass to his lips. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Be careful, Davidson. They're coming for you." Davidson stared at the message, his mind racing. Was it a warning? A threat? He couldn't tell, but it unsettled him deeply. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in her living room, surrounded by files and notes. The evidence Clara had provided was damning, but she knew it wasn't enough to rely on the past. She needed to stay vigilant and anticipate Davidson's next move. As she reviewed her notes, her phone buzzed with a message from Sterling. "Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Big development. Clara uncovered new recordings. Could be the nail in the coffin." Olivia felt a spark of hope. The fight was far from over, but the pieces were falling into place. She had spent her life facing adversity, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Breaking the system. The morning air was crisp and cool as Olivia Harper arrived at James Sterling's office. She carried herself with the poise and confidence of the seasoned officer, though the weight of the past few days pressed heavily on her shoulders. As she stepped inside, the receptionist offered her a warm smile, but Olivia could see the tension in the woman's eyes. The whole city was buzzing with talk of the scandal, and everyone knew this wasn't just another controversy. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Sterling greeted her in the conference room, where Clara James was already seated. The table was covered with documents, photographs, and a laptop displaying a paused audio recording. Sterling gestured for Olivia to sit as he began speaking. "Colonel Harper, we've got a game-changer," he said, his tone urgent. Clara found another recording. This one is from a private meeting Davidson had with his inner circle about a year ago. It's clear evidence of their attempts to cover up a use-of-force incident that left an innocent man hospitalized. Olivia's eyes narrowed as Sterling pressed play. The recording crackled to life, Davidson's voice unmistakable. "Look, we all know the guy wasn't a threat," Davidson said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "But the last thing we need is the department breathing down our necks. We'll write it up as self-defense. Hollis, you've got the paperwork covered." Another voice chimed in. Sergeant Tim Hollis. Yeah, I'll tweak the report." "Anders, you'll back me up, right?" A third voice responded with a chuckle. "Of course. Nobody's going to question us." The recording continued, detailing their blatant manipulation of the incident report and their confidence in the system's inability to hold them accountable. When the audio ended, the room was silent for a moment. "This is it," Clara said, her voice steady. "This is the kind of evidence that can't be ignored." Olivia nodded, her resolve hardening. "We need to release this to the public, but we also need to make sure it gets into the hands of people who can act on it, people who won't be swayed by political pressure or departmental loyalty." Sterling leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Agreed. I'll contact the district attorney's office. They've been looking into police misconduct cases, and this will bolster their investigation. But before we go public, you need to be prepared for the backlash. Davidson and his allies won't go down quietly." Meanwhile, Davidson's desperation reached new heights. He sat in his car in a secluded parking lot, his face pale and his eyes bloodshot. Across from him, Tim Hollis and Rick Anders leaned against their own vehicles, their expressions grim. "This is bad, Mark," Hollis said, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. "If that recording gets out, we're done." "It won't get out," Davidson snapped. "I won't let it." Anders scoffed. "How do you plan to stop it? Harper's not just some civilian you can intimidate. She's got the mayor and half the city on her side." Davidson's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make sure she can't use it." Hollis shifted uncomfortably. "What are you suggesting?" Davidson leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "We send her a message, a real one this time. Something that makes her back off." Anders shook his head. "You're out of your mind. Do you have any idea how much heat we're under? If we try anything, it'll blow up in our faces." But Davidson wasn't listening. His pride and fear had twisted into a dangerous determination. He saw Olivia not just as a threat, but as an enemy to be eliminated. That evening, Olivia attended a community rally at Middleton Square. Hundreds of people had gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for All" and "Accountability Now." The energy in the crowd was electric, a mix of anger, hope, and determination. As Olivia stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. She stood at the podium, her voice carrying over the sea of faces. "Thank you for being here tonight," she began. "This isn't just about me or one officer. This is about a system that has failed us, a system that allows abuse of power to go unchecked. But we have the power to change it. We have the power to demand accountability and to make sure that no one is above the law." The crowd roared in agreement, their cheers echoing through the square. Olivia's speech was passionate and heartfelt, inspiring the kind of unity that could fuel real change. As the rally continued, Davidson watched from a distance, his car parked on a side street. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing with dark thoughts. He felt cornered, his world collapsing around him. For a man who had built his life on control and intimidation, the loss of power was unbearable. When the rally ended, Olivia lingered to speak with supporters and organizers. The square began to empty, the once lively crowd dispersing into the night. Olivia felt a sense of accomplishment, but remained cautious. Her military training had taught her to always be aware of her surroundings, and tonight was no exception. As she walked to her car, a shadow moved in the periphery of her vision. She turned sharply, her instincts on high alert. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was Davidson. "What do you want?" Olivia asked, her voice steady but laced with authority. Davidson stepped closer, his face contorted with anger. "You've ruined my life," he spat. "Everything I've worked for, gone. And for what? To make yourself look like a hero." "This isn't about me," Olivia replied calmly. "It's about justice. And if you can't see that, then you're exactly the kind of person who shouldn't wear a badge." Davidson's hand twitched, hovering near his waistband. Olivia tensed, her training kicking in as she calculated her next move. But before Davidson could act, flashing blue and red lights illuminated the scene. Police cars surrounded the area, their sirens piercing the night. Officers stepped out, their weapons drawn. "Mark Davidson, put your hands in the air," one of them commanded. Davidson froze, his face a mix of shock and rage. Slowly, he raised his hands, realizing he had no way out. As the officers cuffed him, Olivia stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "Justice isn't about revenge," she said, her voice firm. "It's about accountability. And now, you'll face yours." The arrest of Mark Davidson marked a turning point for Middleton. The evidence against him and his inner circle was overwhelming, and the public demanded systemic reforms. Clara's recordings became the centerpiece of a larger investigation into police misconduct, leading to the suspension and eventual termination of several officers. Olivia's courage had sparked a movement, but she knew the work was far from over. As she watched the sun rise the next morning, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight for justice was never easy, but it was always worth it, and she was ready for whatever came next. A new dawn. The air in Middleton seemed to buzz with a newfound sense of possibility. News of Officer Mark Davidson's arrest had spread like wildfire, and the community was alive with conversations about justice, reform, and the long-overdue reckoning within the police department. For Olivia Harper, the events of the past week had been both exhausting and transformative. She had stood her ground, faced threats, and refused to let fear silence her voice. Now, as the dust began to settle, she found herself at the center of a movement that was reshaping the town. The morning after Davidson's arrest, Olivia sat on her porch, sipping a cup of coffee as she watched the sunrise. The quiet moment was a stark contrast to the chaos of recent days, and she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Her phone buzzed with notifications, but this time she didn't ignore them. The messages were overwhelmingly supportive. Thank you notes from strangers, updates from community leaders, and words of encouragement from fellow veterans. One message, however, stood out. It was from Clara James. "Clara, big news. The DA is moving forward with charges against Davidson and his crew. They're also launching a full investigation into the department. I think we finally turned the tide." Olivia felt a swell of satisfaction. The evidence Clara had provided, the recordings, the documents, the testimony, had not only brought down Davidson, but also exposed the systemic corruption that had allowed him to thrive. The district attorney's office had announced a task force to review past cases involving Davidson and his allies, giving hope to those who had suffered in silence for years. Later that day, Olivia attended a press conference organized by Mayor Robert Caldwell. The event was held in the town square, where a podium stood against the backdrop of an American flag and a banner reading "Accountability and Justice for All." As Olivia approached the stage, she was greeted by Mayor Caldwell, Clara James, and James Sterling. The crowd that had gathered was larger than she had anticipated. Hundreds of people from all walks of life, united by a shared desire for change. The mayor began the conference, his voice steady and resolute. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Middleton. The events of the past week have revealed serious issues within our police department, and we are committed to addressing them head-on. This will not be a quick or easy process, but it is necessary. I want to thank Colonel Olivia Harper for her courage and leadership. Without her, we would not be standing here today. The crowd erupted into applause as Olivia stepped forward to speak. She took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. "Thank you, Mayor Caldwell," she began, "and thank you to everyone who has supported this fight for justice. What happened with Officer Davidson is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a larger problem. But we are not powerless. We have the ability to demand accountability, to hold those in power responsible for their actions, and to create a system that serves and protects everyone equally." She paused, letting her words sink in. This is not the end of the fight. It is only the beginning. Change will not come overnight, and it will not come without effort. But together, we can build a community where justice is not just a word, but a reality. The crowd roared its approval, their cheers echoing through the square. Olivia stepped back, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and determination. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation into the Middleton Police Department uncovered a web of misconduct and cover-ups. Davidson and his closest allies were charged with crimes ranging from falsifying reports to excessive use of force. The revelations shocked the town, but also galvanized efforts to rebuild trust in law enforcement. Mayor Caldwell announced a series of reforms, including the creation of an independent oversight committee, mandatory bias training for officers, and a commitment to transparency in policing. Olivia and Clara were invited to serve as advisors to the committee, their experiences and insights deemed invaluable. For Olivia, the role was both an honor and a responsibility. She approached it with the same discipline and dedication that had defined her military career. Clara, too, found a renewed sense of purpose, her whistleblowing efforts finally vindicated. One evening, Olivia returned home to find a letter waiting for her. It was handwritten, the envelope bearing no return address. She opened it carefully, her heart skipping a beat as she read the words inside. "Colonel Harper, I owe you an apology. You stood up for what was right, and I didn't. You have shown me what real courage looks like. I hope one day I can earn the respect you so clearly deserve. Former Officer Rick Anders." Olivia sat down, the letter resting in her hands. It wasn't forgiveness she sought, but the acknowledgement felt significant. It was a small sign that even those complicit in wrongdoing could change when faced with the truth. Months later, Middleton was a town transformed. The police department, once a symbol of fear and corruption, was undergoing a cultural shift. New leadership brought fresh perspectives, and the Oversight Committee ensured that accountability remained a priority. Olivia continued her work with the committee while also advocating for broader reform at the state level. Her story had captured national attention, and she was invited to speak at conferences, schools, and community events. Her message was clear: justice was worth fighting for, no matter the obstacles. One evening, as Olivia walked through Middleton Square, she saw a mural painted on the side of a building. It depicted her standing tall and resolute, her hand outstretched as if guiding the community toward a brighter future. Below it were the words, "Justice for all starts with us." Olivia felt a surge of emotion. She had not sought recognition, but the mural was a testament to the collective effort of everyone who had stood with her. It was a reminder that change was possible, not through the actions of one person, but through the courage and unity of many. As the sun set over Middleton, Olivia stood before the mural, her heart full of hope. The fight for justice was far from over, but she knew they were on the right path. Together, they had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for lasting change. And for Olivia, that was the ultimate victory. As Olivia stood before the mural, a small group of children gathered nearby, their laughter breaking the quiet serenity of the square. One of them, a young girl with braided hair and bright eyes, tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed at the mural. "Mom, is that her?" the girl asked, her voice filled with awe. Her mother smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. That's Colonel Harper. She's the reason we're safer now." The girl ran up to Olivia, her excitement bubbling over. "Are you really her? The lady who made the bad officer go away?" Olivia knelt to meet the girl's gaze. "Yes, I am," she said with a warm smile. "But it wasn't just me. A lot of people worked together to make things right." The girl beamed. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Olivia's heart swelled with emotion. "You already are," she said, gently patting the girl's shoulder. "And if you always stand up for what's right, you'll make the world a better place." The girl hugged Olivia tightly before running back to her mother, her laughter echoing through the square. Olivia stood, watching the girl skip away, a sense of peace settling over her. For all the hardship, moments like this made it worthwhile. Over the next year, Middleton became a model for change. The reforms inspired other towns and cities to reevaluate their own systems, sparking a broader conversation about accountability and justice in policing. Olivia's work extended beyond her town, as she was invited to consult on similar reforms nationwide. Her voice, calm yet commanding, became a symbol of resilience and integrity. Clara James, once a disillusioned whistleblower, found herself at the forefront of a growing movement. With Olivia's encouragement, she wrote a memoir detailing her experiences, titled "Breaking the Blue Wall: One Officer's Fight for Justice." The book became a bestseller, its release further amplifying the call for systemic change. The Oversight Committee, chaired by community leaders and supported by Olivia and Clara, continued to oversee the police department's transformation. Reports of misconduct dropped dramatically, and the department began to rebuild trust with the community through outreach programs and transparent practices. One quiet evening, Olivia returned home after a long day of meetings. She sat on her porch, gazing at the stars as a cool breeze rustled the trees. Her phone buzzed with a notification, but this time it wasn't about work or the latest development in the movement. It was a message from her nephew, Jake, who had recently enlisted in the military. "Jake, Aunt Olivia, I wanted you to know that I joined because of you. You taught me what it means to serve with honor. Thank you for being my hero." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she read the message. She hadn't sought to be anyone's hero, but knowing she had inspired others made every challenge worth it. The next day, Olivia attended a community celebration in Middleton Square. It marked the one-year anniversary of the reforms and served as a tribute to the resilience of the town. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the square lit up with lanterns, their glow casting a warm light over the crowd. Mayor Caldwell took the stage, his voice ringing out over the gathering. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the changes we've made, but the people who made them possible. Colonel Olivia Harper, please join me on stage." The crowd erupted into applause as Olivia stepped forward, her heart pounding with gratitude. The mayor handed her a plaque, engraved with the words, "In honor of courage and leadership, Olivia Harper, champion of justice." Olivia held the plaque aloft, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "This plaque doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to all of you, the people who stood up, who spoke out, and who demanded better. Change isn't the work of one person. It's the work of many. And together, we've shown what's possible when we refuse to stay silent." The crowd rose to their feet, their applause thundering through the square. Olivia felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the fight for justice would continue long after her. She had lit a spark, and the fire would burn bright for generations to come. As the celebration continued, Olivia stood at the edge of the square, watching the community she loved come together in hope and unity. The past year had been a journey of hardship, courage, and triumph. And while the road ahead would have its challenges, Olivia was ready to face them, secure in the knowledge that she wasn't alone. For justice, for unity, and for a brighter future, she would always stand tall.